In the interest of time, I'm going to start introducing our next speaker. So while everyone's finding your seats, my pleasure to introduce Marie-Louise Kotmeissen, who was not only instrumental in bringing all of us here today, but is also the head of Open Innovation and Science at Aarhus University. She has been here developing and directing the university's use of open innovation science as a new model for IP-free industry collaborations since 2016. And she will share with us some thoughts on how this model emerged at Aarhus University and how it is today being applied to several new research areas, including materials science, food, drug discovery, and carbon capture. So Marie-Louise, the floor is yours.
So it's on. Okay. It's always a little bit intimidating to take the stage after hearing from two initiatives that has served as inspiration for what we do at Aarhus University. So this will be the practitioner's guide, the newcomer's introduction to open innovation and science and how to introduce that at a university in Denmark. And 6 years ago, a very small group of people, including myself, began speculating whether or not it would be possible to introduce patent-free and open research collaborations with industry at Aarhus University. We had none of the sort at the time. And this was the same year where the Neuro and TOSI at McGill University adopted its open science principle as an entire organization. We were 5 people. And also the Structural Genomics Consortium had been around for decades at this point and had already produced excellent results and proven that the openness could lead to innovation downstream. So we wanted to bring something similar to Denmark. We wanted to go into the great wide open and figure out what openness would look like in Denmark within the wet sciences. But again, we were 5 people with no prior experience with this model and absolutely no funding and even fewer fans. So you have to start somewhere, right? And somehow, in the years that followed, Aarhus University has managed to develop its own take on these open science partnerships, or open innovation and science, whatever we call it, and apply it to different research areas. And it's not a one-size-fits-all. So I'll try to take you through some of the learnings that we've made along the way. We started doing this for all the same reasons that you've just heard about from our keynote speakers. So I'm not going to dwell on that. We were clearly inspired by these initiatives, but even though we had seen this work abroad, we couldn't present a clear-cut business case of the merits of this to our university management or even clear value propositions to the companies we wanted to work with, because we couldn't guarantee it would work in a Danish setting. So it was really an experiment with an unknown endpoint and unknown results. But our university management at the time seemed to focus on the promise that this model would probably lead to more collaboration with industry and probably also create more impact from more of the research that we do at the university. So the appeal at this early stage was that it could add to the mission of the university to do good for society, to create more broad value in the surrounding society, and not just for companies, but also companies. So that was our starting point, to focus on those close-knit collaborations with industry in an open setting. Of course, we knew also from the beginning that we wouldn't be able to take the model we had seen from abroad and introduce it to Denmark one-to-one. We needed to make our own adaptations. There was none of the sort in Denmark at the time, so it was clear that we had a lot of work ahead of us. We needed to build a culture towards openness where it was the default mode to collaborate rather than see each other as competitors. And also, of course, we have a law on public inventions, much like the Bayh-Dole Act, and we don't have professors' privilege at the universities. We need to disclose our inventions to the tech transfer office, and then they will explore if it holds any commercial potential. So we involved the tech transfer office in this endeavor almost from day one, and they have become our closest collaboration partner and helped us figure out what can we do openly through dialogue with companies and investors. What is that pre-competitive niche that we can work within? What makes sense to do openly? What are we comfortably doing openly? And is it interesting from an academic point of view also? We might have been a bit cautious to begin with, as one is when doing initial experiments, and we have since learned that we can probably do more openly than we're doing. So all of this was very small and bottom-up initiative, no funding, and as such, we needed to make many trade-offs compared with the larger and more structured initiatives abroad. We couldn't focus on investing in an infrastructure for sharing knowledge to begin with, or even develop standards for quality. We had to focus on just getting people to collaborate openly. That was at the heart of what we did. So we started within material sciences with no funding at all. We relied on student projects, but the interest from industry and academics alike was enough for us to move into drug discovery, where we got a grant funding from the Novo Nordisk Foundation, where we are at today, thank you. And they have since helped us move into even more fields. And you will be hearing from Professor Alfred Spoorman later on how he uses openness to combat climate change in a mission-driven center. And that's a different use of openness than what we're doing here in drug discovery. And the latest member of the Open family within food and plant science. So our flagship initiative is called ODIN. And it's a drug discovery network without patents. It includes companies and, of course, researchers from the university. We got a grant to do a relatively short pilot project of 3 years. So we are not being measured on our ability to develop new drugs within this short time frame, but more to demonstrate that people are, in fact, interested in working in this way and that it actually works. Because that was not a given at the time. We chose two themes with industry, biomarkers and target validation, because we felt fairly confident that those were pre-competitive by definition. So that was a good place to start. And we involved pharma and biotech companies of all sizes in the design of our actual network. And they are equally represented in our governing bodies as academia. And you can see them here. Those were the 9 original companies. We wanted even small companies to be able to be part of this, because 90% of the Danish industry structure is made up of SMEs. So, of course, that needed to be considered here. And we have absolutely no membership fee. Anyone should be able to join. It's philanthropically funded. And that is absolutely necessary when starting something new. Provide the right incentives, but also the right seed capital. And we've been lucky that the Novo Nordisk Foundation provided that. So how does this work? Okay, this doesn't work, but the top of the drawing, we launched our platform 2 weeks or so before Denmark went into the first COVID lockdown. So that was excellent timing. And we had to redesign most of our processes and go digital. That turned out really to be a blessing in disguise, because that meant that more companies were actually finding the time to interact with us. And then we could always move into in-person interaction afterwards. But we provide a digital platform where companies and researchers alike can go on free of charge and showcase any idea they may have for a research project they want to do. It could also be that a researcher is showcasing their competencies that they want to contribute with to other people's projects, or a company going on and showcasing a research project problem that they may have encountered, and they need to source inputs and partners from a wide range of contributors in the ODIN network, sometimes even from non-obvious sources, from disciplines they don't usually work with, or other companies. And we help them do that through relatively simple facilitation and ideation and matchmaking tools. We also have a secretariat that provides handheld facilitation to make sure that ideas and people are matched in the right way. And that's actually quite necessary when you're doing this, because we found that some of our researchers did not have extensive networks, company partners to begin with. And they had often spent months trying to get a hold of a company or the right person within a large pharma company to pay attention to their idea, and fail at it. And we could limit that time, reduce that time to a week within ODIN. So that was also an incentive to join. But if you can come up with the right team and the right idea, an idea that doesn't just benefit one company, but, you know, is of broad relevance. It's a generic problem that, if solved, will benefit entire sectors or help elevate the scientific field, then it's a good candidate for Odin. And the team can apply us, the Secretariat, for funding. We act as a local foundation and parcel out that grant we got into smaller ones through competitive project calls with international peer review. And if you do get the grant, you must share your data and results openly with the public, no strings attached. It must become public domain, and preferably as we go along. And all of that is being regulated by a legal framework that our TTO made with the companies, so that the contract for all of this was clear to everyone up front. We share the foreground knowledge from the project, not the background knowledge. And we use the same contract for every project we initiate. So that means everyone knows the terms up front, it's non-negotiable, and we don't have to spend a lot of time negotiating before being able to start in each project. So we're trying to actually deliver ease of collaboration here and speed up the process as much as possible. And so this right part of the circle is public domain. You can't patent our open results per se, but you can use them for product development downstream. No strings attached again. And most of our projects are designed with a clear, or all of our projects are designed to be able to lead to downstream innovation in some way. They may not know the specific application that they want to use our open results for up front, but it needs to be able to demonstrate the capacity to lead to some innovation downstream. So they are also designed in a way that the partners will want to potentially mature the open results in closed, standard and contracted research projects as we know them once the Odin project is done. So all of this is outside the realm of Odin. And that's why our TTO sees openness as a pipeline for more of the classical tech transfer. Because what are we essentially doing here? We are de-risking companies engaging in high-risk, high-gain projects, while ideas, more exploratory, basic research that they probably would have been able to invest in on market terms, usually. We are also de-risking them testing out new partners at the university, finding out what else is out there. So this is all meant to sort of pave the way for new research opportunities and innovation opportunities for all. And essentially, you could say that this is a collaboration machine. We focus very much on active engagement of industry in the project. And it's also a machine that is meant to broker that trust element that Nicholas and Al was talking about as pivotal to success before, because once you get into a project and you contribute on an equal footing, that trust will, it can arise, and that's what we ought to do here. So much like Al demonstrated, we are doing open projects in the earliest and pre-competitive stages of drug discovery. It's research that our tech transfer office might, in theory, be able to patent, but it wouldn't make sense for them to do so from a commercial point of view, because there would be no takers from industry. Because even though we are creating knowledge and building blocks for downstream innovation that can help drive the innovation, it's not something that will end up being an integral part of a final product that will need to be protected. So why not share this, as Al and Dylan have both mentioned? And the discussion on when something should be open and closed is definitely not over in Denmark. We need to repeat that every time we transfer this to a new research area. So essentially, we start with just asking companies and investors, at what point in the innovation process do you absolutely need the patent or the licensing agreement? At what point is the exclusive access to a research result needed in order for you to make the massive investments in the research results and transform it into a product? Is it always at the beginning of the innovation process? Or will there be areas that we can, to the advantage of everyone, do as an open collective effort that will help us create a public knowledge foundation that we can validate quickly through collective problem solving, and which we can all stand on to elevate the field or to de-risk the company selecting the right candidate to take through clinical trials where we know 9 out of 10 fail, and often due to an insufficient knowledge foundation in the earliest drug discovery. So that question, well, we revisit that quite often, I'd say. And it seems that what we're doing openly today wasn't possible 10 years ago. So the pre-competitive niche that we are working within seems to be growing, as Al also said. And I'd like to know more about why. But in the time that we've been carrying out these experiments of openness, Annette Miltoft here, the head of our tech transfer office, states that, well, we're not seeing any decline in the number of invention disclosures at the university. In fact, it seems that it will rise this year. I'm not saying that's due to open innovation and science, but at least it doesn't seem to have any negative effects on all of this, which only goes to prove that the two can coexist. The open approach doesn't undermine classical tech transfer. Rather, for us, it's about finding a balance between open and proprietary mechanisms in order to create as much impact for society of the research that we do. So it's a question of impact and not necessarily IP management as such. Our companies don't pay any membership fee. We need to get all of this started. And as I said before, when we started this, I couldn't really promise them a specific value proposition. It was all about believing in the rationale. But they do contribute quite a lot. We require them to be active partners in the research project, not passive customers. And that changes the dynamic in these open projects. It's no longer transactional. It's a two-directional knowledge sharing street here. And they contribute intellectually, but also materially, and they perform analysis on equipment that we don't have access to. And sometimes they mentor our postdocs, and our researchers quite like this one. Recently, Teresa Norn, our moderator, has carried out a midterm evaluation of OTIN. We are only a little over halfway in. Our projects aren't finished yet, so we don't know exactly what type of innovation effect will materialize from these scientific projects. That will only be known years from now. But in terms of the rationale behind this model of collaboration, the reports state that it seems to be sound. It is working. And when interviewing industry participants, they point to the fact that this model is good for dealing with complex and unsolved challenges, projects where you don't necessarily have an application in mind to begin with, but where you can open up new innovation opportunities. They say it's good for high-risk, high-gain projects, perhaps not surprisingly, given that it's philanthropically funded. But they also state that it's not good if you have a well-defined and understood project where you know exactly how to move that project from the lab and into the clinic. Of course, that will be commercially sensitive for you. You can find the report here by using the QR code. It seems to be a recurrent visitor here today. Also, when asking the participants from the university, they like this because it gives them an option to pursue underexplored but promising ideas that they probably wouldn't be able to get funding from the traditional funding bodies. And they appreciate the easy matchmaking. If you don't have an industry network, you're not disqualified. We can give this to them. And of course, 100% funding of the academics part in all of this is a clear incentive as well. And that is needed when you're trying to produce and introduce something new. You need that. And the access to industry expertise on different terms, knowledge about automation, about standards, that seems to be something that interests them as well. So I said in the beginning that we are not being measured on ability to create new drugs within 3 years. That would be something. But rather, are people interested in working in this way? And that is a resounding yes. The interest has been overwhelming. 44 companies have been involved in some or all of our activities. Of course, not all of them can be part of the projects we fund. We don't have money to support all of that. But also 107 principal investigators have joined the ideation and matchmaking and application processes. Our goal was 15 and 30 respectively. So that's a good result for us. We've co-created a legal frame that has been copied to other open initiatives, both in Denmark, but also abroad. And we've started 11 projects, and we hope that good will come from these projects. So now, even before we are done with the pilot, we are in a situation where the concept has already been transferred to other research areas. Later today, you will hear Professor Alfred Spoorman talk about how he has adapted the concept to combat climate change. And I've been allowed to mention that we are about to do an initiative that hasn't been released to the press yet on plant and food science, where we are seeking to replace meat in the human diet with more sustainable plant-based proteins. And each time we do this, each time we move to a new area, we need to define a pre-competitive niche. And some of these areas have much more complex value chains than pharma. And that puts different challenges for us. All right? Yes, this is the plant to food. We are, well, hopefully doing this in the years to come with 4 universities, University of Copenhagen, Danish Technical University in Wageningen, in addition to Aarhus University, and a Danish food and bioclusters. And the value chain for that project is very complex, from plant breeders to retailers and consumers in the end. And if you want to succeed with the mission of replacing meat in the human diet, okay, we can do a lot of early stage research, but if it's rejected by the latter links of that chain, and in particular the consumers, we've lost. So somehow we need to curl up that entire value chain into the early stage projects and include those perspectives from a much more diverse group of stakeholders. And that's the new thing about this project. And I like that they are different. I like that they are challenging. Also, in a different project, like Alfred would be telling you, time can be of the essence, finding new technologies. We might be in a situation where we have a need to develop groundbreaking new technologies, and patents might actually need to play a role at a very early stage. We can't necessarily do all of the technology development as open innovation and science, because we need to attract those investments in order to reach the market and solve the mission in time. But what can we then do openly? Well, for instance, we can use the openness on a system analysis approach, where we sort of identify if some of the new technologies can be scaled. And are there any obstacles to actually having them reach the market and do the good they need to do? Are there infrastructural capacity problems? Are there legal obstacles? Are there something else we need to consider? And in that process, we are not only just involving researchers and companies, we're also involving policymakers in a different way than we're used to seeing them. It's not just pick the winners role we are assigning to the politicians now. It's different. We need them to remove those obstacles. Okay, and this is one of the last things I'm going to say. This open approach has helped us and the CTO adopt a new perspective on how we actually create impact of our research. Impact should always be the end goal here. And we might be able to use openness to recycle some of IP that might be waived as part of the classical tech transfer process, because sometimes I am told, Annette, I hope you can correct me if I'm wrong, our TTO manages to negotiate IP in a traditional closed research collaboration with industry. And once the project is done, something happens, often random stuff in the company, and they choose not to use that IP anyway. And as Al told us, then it's really difficult to hand off that piece of IP to other companies, competitors, who will always be suspicious of that result. So why not try to revitalize it by throwing it into an open platform, a collaboration machine that really has the goal of tearing this apart and reconfiguring it. And hopefully then it can find a new way to produce impact for society, because otherwise it will just end up as a, okay, that was perhaps a little bit optimistic, but as a research paper. And those are notoriously difficult to translate. It's like getting the recipe for a very difficult sauce béarnaise. Unless you're in the kitchen with a chef who knows how to produce this, odds are it will go wrong in your own kitchen. So this is a way to surpass that. And no matter what version of openness we might be using in the future at Aarhus University and in collaboration with others, the goal is always to create as much value for society as possible. So it's not a matter of using openness for the sake of openness, because that can be quite damaging to that mission, or patenting for the sake of patents. It's about finding that balance between open tools and proprietary ones, patents. And in that respect, we are very much inspired by Professor Richard Gold from McGill University, and I can only encourage you to look into his work if you're interested in IP management within an open setting. So that's all from me.